Gaza War, day 231. No end in sight, despite the International Court of Justice today ordering as a additional provisional measure that Israel immediately stop its assault on Gaza, allow humanitarian aid in, open all the crossings. And Israel, in response, launched an even more savage bombing on Rafah. And some of the ministers said some things like the only possible response to this is to attack Rafah even harder. And by the way, I guess I should say I think that they will go all the way to the western edge of Rafah. I mean, if you look at the the map, it's sort of like, yeah, the western edge. They'll go all the way across. They're planning to go all the way through the city and destroy the city like they've destroyed every other part of Gaza. And I don't see why they would not do that. They'll lose men, they'll lose material, and they won't liberate any hostages, and they will nevertheless do this. And that's we started to talk about that yesterday on the Sit Rep about how the war is evolving and how Israel's strategy is kind of emerging, their long-term strategy. And I'll get back to that at the end of this video because I think it is there is a clear picture emerging of what Israel's going to try to do long term. One thing they're going to try to do no matter what, and another thing they're going to try to do if they can get away with it. And I don't think they'll be able to get away with either long term, but it's increasingly clear that they've settled on some kind of plan. And I'll explain why I think that as well. So the ICJ ordered that the Israelis responded by stating that they're going to completely blow it off. And I noticed this on Twitter that they um, the casualness that Israel blows off international law and the International Court of Justice, and they're so contemptuous of it, and they blow off international genocide law. And then you have students who are protesting and camping on the various gardens and lawns of their universities, and the universities are the administrators that are ardent Israel supporters are insisting on the letter of the law and the legality of the campus use of space policy. So they support Israel, which doesn't care about international genocide law, and they're attacking protesters using the um, letter of campus space policy law. I guess you guys probably saw the New York um, campus police officer who said, "I support genocide against all of you people," or something. That's charming. So, yeah, all kinds of stuff with the law on the legal front. And how do we assess this? I mean, I think that um, I think it's important. I think that this is the legal institutions of the West trying to protect themselves from complete destruction, and they're not going to succeed. So ultimately, um, this is the discarding of yet another institution. But I think it's to their credit that they did it, and I think that it is damaging in some way to Israel and what they're trying to do. But you know, it's the facts on the ground that matter more. So we'll uh we'll see what else. I don't know if there's any more to come out of the legal sphere. It's hard for me to imagine. The ICC has spoken, the ICJ has spoken twice. if the ICJ eventually hears the whole case of South Africa, the genocide has taken place and it'll take a long time, and then they rule that a genocide has happened. I don't know. I don't know whether that'll make a difference. I don't see how it would. But who knows? So meanwhile, on the battlefront, there were a couple more major, what we called yesterday, complex operations in Beit Lahia, which is also in northern Gaza, a complex ambush. Qassam reported that they hit two Merkava tanks, as well as two sniper hits in Beit Lahia. Iraq reported launching a drone on Eilat. Yemen had their Friday million-person march, their massive march in Yemen, and Hezbollah reported among their dozen attacks on the border in the north. They reported destroying a Merkava tank today, and they said this Merkava tank that they destroyed today was replacing a Merkava tank that they destroyed yesterday. Um, I saw the main topic of today is Nasrallah's speech, but there was also a letter from Hamas to the Palestinian people, a message of the Islamic resistance movement Hamas to our Palestinian people in general and the people of Gaza in particular. And they're talking about how they're praising the people and their ability to hold on, and explaining that the resistance leadership decided to exercise their right to resist against all of these things that Israel is doing. They said, you have endured what nations before you could not bear. Many states and empires have fallen and crumbled against wars far less severe than this genocide war against us in Gaza, the West Bank, Al-Quds, the occupied interior, and all places, yet you remain steadfast and firm, teaching the world the meanings of patience, steadfastness, sacrifice for the dignity and honor of your nation, despite the betrayal, silence, and abandonment, leaving us to face this vicious war alone. It's a very moving letter. Um, you know, they said, we're working to um, offer you even a little in return. We want to improve the reality, your reality, and build a cradle, but we're unable to fully achieve this. And then they have a message to the Zionist occupation. They say they're very sarcastic. They say you have indeed achieved a great and overwhelming victory in revealing the true face of the crime and terrorism of your temporary entity, a truth we could not have exposed even if we spent years trying. And then they go through the details. And then they say, but our question to you is, can you remain for a moment in your positions of occupation or continue your ground operations safely? Can you build fortifications to protect yourself from our resistance or live a moment of safety in our land? We will not answer you, but our answer will be what you see through our actions, not what you hear. So that also tells you something about the way it's a letter, it's a piece of rhetoric in a way, but it tells you something of how the resistance understands their strategy. Their strategy is to make sure that the Israelis cannot build fortifications, cannot be safe in their constant attacks on Palestinians in Gaza. And again, I'm gonna talk about where the war has gotten to at the end after I talk about Nasrallah's speech, which is now. So Hassan Nasrallah, I thought he was speaking tomorrow, which is why I thought I would be getting back to you tomorrow. I didn't think I would be coming back with another sit rep today, but here we are. And Nasrallah spoke today. Most of the speech was about the late leader of Iran, the president Raisi and the foreign minister, who both of whom Nasrallah knew very well, and a lot of praise about them, um, a lot of praise for them, and a lot of their history and what they were trying to do, and some kind of answers for people who are like I don't know some kind of I guess he's addressing some group of people that are pro resistance but anti Iran. I guess there are people who are pro resistance but anti Syria, and there are people who are pro resistance but anti Iran. And Nasrallah always comes out and explains why this is not really a pro resistance position, and this is not how the resistance understands things. And he said specifically the two countries that we praise um, are that have sacrificed a lot are Syria and Iran. So so in the last, I guess that was about the first hour of the speech, and then the last half hour of the speech he addresses what's going on, the war in Gaza, the war with Israel, and he says a few things. One is he talks about the rhetorical conflicts between Netanyahu and the military and security apparatus. He talks about how there are people inside Israel signing petitions to end the war and protests, the recognition of the Palestinian state by various European countries, which is he thinks of as a significant loss for the occupation and a achievement of the Al-Aqsa flood battle, October 7th, etc. He says the Israel's now in the International Criminal Court. He says, he basically says, I'm not going to address the fact that they're indicting um, resistance people and equating them. I'm not gonna address that. But the point is, from the Israel point perspective, it's a huge loss for them. And he pointed out, just like I did just now, that Israel responded to the International Court of Justice ruling by attacking Rafah and doing some of the most severe raids on Rafah. So just a lawless entity, and it exposes the lawless entity. He mentions the student protests in the US and all over the West. Canada, he mentioned the students in Canada. So if any, he's kind of expressed the fact that the resistance is aware of these protests and thinks that they're important. And he said something really actually really good here, I thought. He said something like, they're not the same religion as us. They're not the same people as us. They're just moved because of their consciences. They're moved because of what they saw, the images that they saw, because we're human first, all of these things, but we are human beings, and they responded as human beings, and that's what he recognizes. And that, I thought that was a very, very good and important point. And like, the recognition of the common humanity of everybody is definitely something that the resistance is able to do, but the Israeli the pro-Israel people and the Israelis are not. They only believe that they are humans, and they don't think of the rest of us as human beings. Certainly not anyone from the region that they're actively trying to destroy right now. So then he kind of gets into addressing Netanyahu almost directly, and Netanyahu apparently said something like, "We have some surprises in store for restoring security to the north." And Nasrallah basically mocked him for saying that. The phrase surprises really was a phrase that Nasrallah took and ran with. So he said, "Really? You have surprises? I actually think we're the ones who have surprises. October 7th was a surprise to you. When Hezbollah launched the war the day after, that was a surprise to you. Yemen, after being destroyed for 9 years, nobody thought that Yemen was going to be able to support the resistance in Gaza, and they surprised you. all of these are surprises. When you bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Iran surprised you with Operation True Promise. So actually, we're the ones who have the surprises, and we have more surprises. And he said, we know everything about you. We know all the things that you're trying to do, and your deceptions don't fool us, and the resistance will continue. So the other thing he says is, remember, he kind of reminds his audience why they opened the front with Israel in the first place. He said, the first thing we wanted to do was support Gaza, but the second thing we wanted to do was um, prevent any preemptive strike by the enemy on Lebanon. So once again, it's Nasrallah is constantly, I think, in the Lebanon context and in the broader Arab world context, he's constantly having to remind people that you don't get safety by giving Israel what they want, what they ask you for. You don't get safety by sitting by and hoping that they don't attack you and that you're not next. You get the only safety you can possibly have is in fighting back. And in this case, Nasrallah is saying the only safety for Lebanon was in striking first and making sure that Israel understands that the war in their north is a losing proposition for them. So that was Nasrallah's speech. I think he said the other key thing that I think he said was, and he made a little joke about Israeli pronunciation. He said, um, the defense minister says he's going to attack and strike a decisive blow against Hezbollah in the north. And he said, Habibi. He pronounced it the way Arabs pronounce Habibi. Habibi means like my dear, oh my dear, or my sweetheart, or whatever. And he said Habibi, and then he made fun of the fact that Israelis can't pronounce that H from Habibi. They pronounce it with a KH, Habibi. So he goes, Habibi, Habibi, with what forces are you going to strike this decisive blow? You're not even out of Gaza. So there's a little bit of mockery. There's quite a bit of mockery actually. But the other thing that he did was he said something really, he's been talking about this as like a tragedy. And the thing about Nasrallah's speeches over the past 3/4 of a year is that he's he's talked about it in terms of a tragedy, but also in terms of an opportunity. And this was one of it was just something a little bit that he said, because he kind of said, we want to support Gaza, we want to we want to prevent the enemy from making an attack against us, and also if the opportunity arises, we want to get our land back, the Shabah farms, the part of the part of Lebanon that Israel has been occupying for decades, that they want back, and the Syria wants the Golan Heights back. So he's said at various points, including today's speech, that this war that Israel has kind of unleashed could be an opportunity to get them out, to liberate their lands from Israel. And so he said something like, of course we want an end to this war. Of course we want an end to this war, but if they continue this war, if Netanyahu continues this war, it's going to be a catastrophe for Israel. So all of that, yeah, a reinforcement of a lot of what Nasrallah has been saying, but I got that streak of the way that the resistance understands this as ultimately an opportunity because of the overreach and the errors and the constraints that appear to be so telling on what the Israel and the West are able to do right now. And so that kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about in terms of the news. There's a bit of analysis about the devolution. It's one of the comments actually in yet last night's sit rep. They summarized the sit rep as that Israel is devolving the war into an endless series of raids, air raids, but also ground raids. And it's like um, when they said, everything they've said for months that everything culminates in this invasion of Rafah, after which we'll have finished Hamas off. And now that they're in Rafah, they're basically like, we're in Rafah, we're going into more into Rafah, we're gonna go back there, we're back in Jabalia, we're back in Beit Hanun, we're in the Netzarim corridor, and there's fighting in all of these places. And they're going for the hospitals and they're destroying the hospitals and they're blocking aid and they're killing civilians and they're doing their mass executions and they're rounding up people for their torture death camps. So Rafah wasn't the end. They've announced and America announced that Rafah was a red line, like I said yesterday, and then they announced that it wasn't a red line actually, and they never said it was a red line. So the they're returning to the places they've gone, and then they're leaving those places again. So Zaytun, they went into Zaytun in a big way, and then they left. Soon they'll leave Jabalia. They'll probably go into somewhere else. They're in Beit Hanun now. They're going to be in the Netzarim corridor for a while, probably. They're going to be in Rafah for a while, and they're going to be taking casualties the whole time as they try to murder civilians, attack civilian targets, attack hospitals in particular, and attack any vital infrastructure that the Palestinians are able to get going again. So that's the pattern. That's what they do now. And that's like where they've gone. That's what they're able to do. That's what they're able to accomplish. And I guess that's what their strategy has become, is endless raids. And the advantage of such a methodology, I don't know if I would call it a strategy, but the advantage of such a method is that they're not sitting ducks, right? If they're not going and trying to occupy Gaza, then they're not sitting there waiting to be sniped and hit by missile launchers and mines and improvised explosive devices and machine gun fire and everything. They're moving around, they're attacking targets, and then they're getting out of there. So by moving around, they're reducing the number of human casualties they take. By not staying in one place for very long, they're minimizing the losses of vehicles. By doing lots of air attacks, air raids, they're minimizing the amount of troops that they're putting on the ground. They're making vulnerable, and they're satisfying the bloodlust of their increasingly insane society, which, as Alon Mizrahi, I mentioned in yesterday's sit rep, talked about how many of their soldiers are clinically insane by now. So that's the advantages of the strategy, such as it is. The main point of the strategy and the main advantage is that you can extend it, in addition to trying to keep casualties and the resource intensity of this war at a certain threshold, below a certain threshold. It enables the Israelis to kind of extend the war forever. So you just have some forces ready, and they go and they raid and they come out. They go and they raid and they come out, and you do that forever, rinse and repeat for years and years and years. Just attack civilians and run, hit and run. So they've become, like I said again yesterday, a couple of sit reps ago, it's the Israelis now who are behaving like a terrorist guerrilla kind of force. They're not behaving like a conventional Western army that goes and takes territory and controls people and occupies territory and annexes it. They're behaving like a guerrilla force that hits and runs. It hits and runs before they can get before they take too many casualties. Here's the disadvantages of such a strategy. One is, as we mentioned yesterday, it means basically sacrificing all of their hostages, their captives that were taken on the military captives that were taken on October 7th, that are gonna all die of hunger or Israeli mass firepower, indiscriminate firepower is going to kill all of their prisoners. And there's no, if you're just accepting that the war is going to go on forever in this format, you're accepting that there's never going to be a deal and there's never going to be an exchange. So make no mistake, the Israelis have decided it's more important to them to hold Palestinian prisoners who are supposedly worth nothing to them, who they supposedly see as lower than animals. Their ability to hold those prisoners is far more important to them than the lives of their precious Israeli settlers. They have turned, I believe they have turned that corner. I believe that Israel, as an elite and as a society, has decided they don't want their hostages back. If as if it means they have to cut the war short or give up Palestinian prisoners and their ability to take Palestinian prisoners. This is a bad decision that Israel has made collectively, but it does appear to be the decision that they've made. And it will have many consequences for their society long term, but it appears to be what they've concluded. They've had campaigns of family members of hostages saying, we don't want our children back. We want the war more. So they have turned that corner, and that disadvantage appears to have been surmounted. Now, other disadvantages of this forever hit and run strategy that Israel has moved into is they can't control Gaza long term. They can't destroy Hamas. They can't destroy the enemy militarily. They can't get into the tunnels. They've given that possibility up. They will not be defeating or destroying the enemy military. They will be harassing and raiding the enemy society. So that's a big disadvantage. It's a big thing that they've given up on, as well as their prisoners. And it basically means they've given up on trying to prevent Gaza from retaining its independence, right? Gaza will retain its independence under constant attack and raid by Israel, but Israel will not be able to destroy Gaza's military force, which is the basis of Gaza's independence, such as it is. They will not be dictating to Gaza. They will be attacking and murdering people in Gaza, but they've given up on occupation and control of Gaza long term. In addition to their disadvantages, there are certain assumptions that this strategy depends on. This strategy assumes that all the resistance in Gaza is capable of is waiting to be hit, right? Waiting to be attacked in one of these raids and then trying to defend Gaza from these raids, defend individual cities or locations from these raids. It assumes that Israel will long term be the side of the conflict that decides on the escalation level. They'll be able to hit the hardest and their enemy won't be able to, from Gaza, they won't be able to hit them harder than they hit. So Israel would be the one who decides how intense the conflict is. That's the assumption behind this strategy. This strategy of Israel also assumes that they can keep all the other problems contained. So they can contain the problem with Lebanon, they can contain the problem, the attacks coming from Iraq, they can contain the attacks coming from Yemen, the economic damage inflicted by the blockade, the possibility of other, the ever open possibility of other belligerents joining as the conflict goes on. It assumes that America will continuously make available to them all the resources they need to do this continuous raid forever, this raid level of attack forever. I think America will make available whatever America has. The question is, will America have? Does America have enough resources um, to provide Israel while they're also doing whatever they're doing in Ukraine and everywhere else in the world at this level of intensity? And will Israel have the people they need to operate this equipment? And will they be able to replace this equipment on the timeline that they want to maintain the war at the level that they want? These are all control systems problems that I do not think they can solve. But I think that is what they are going to try to do. And the last thing is that Netzarim, just to return to that Netzarim corridor, that road that splits Gaza just south of Gaza City, which is now the end of which has this American pier. And that is the question, I think, whether they can hang on to that corridor medium term. I think they're going to come under a lot of attack in that corridor. And I think I don't know what's going to happen when the pier, if and when the pier starts coming under attack and from whom. But I don't think that, I don't think the permanent occupation of Gaza via this, the Israeli holding of this corridor is going to work out. I'm predicting it's not going to work out. But I do, they have been able to hold on to it for, I don't know, months, and we'll see how long they can continue this way. Now that they're being supplied militarily from the pier, from the Americans directly, maybe that'll help them hold on a little bit longer. So that's it. That's what I wanted to do today. I wanted to tell you about Nasrallah's speech. Wanted to give you that breakdown, and then also talk a little bit about the shape, the way the war is now shaping up, the way that Israel is now trying to turn this into a endless conflict, with the substance of which is kind of raids, nonstop raids against hit and run against civilian targets. So we will see how this pattern unfolds in the coming days. Probably going to do a tanky therapy on Sunday, so watch out for that. And we will and hang in there until then. Like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you in the next one.